Well, my name is Mike McGill, and I am so excited to be with you and preach with you and share the good news with you this morning. Before we do that, one of the things we like to do around here is once a month we like to recognize some of those people who volunteer here at Washington Heights Church. And one of those groups of people that go unnoticed a lot, intentionally, is our security team. These guys, that's right. These guys are the ones watching our doors, watching our doorstep, because unfortunately we live in an age where the church has become a target increasingly more and more. And so these guys are keeping watch so that we can continue to enjoy ourselves in here. So thank you guys for your time, your service. Appreciate you. And that's just one of many ways to get plugged in. If that's something that you want to do, like Wendy mentioned earlier, you can fill out that connection card and drop that in any one of the buckets in the back after service. There's so many different opportunities to get plugged in here at the church. One other thing that I want to make you aware of, last week we started one of our short 5-week classes. It's called Starting Point. If you're new to faith, if you're coming back to the faith, if you have questions about your journey, questions about God and what it all means, there's a class that meets for the next several weeks at 10:45. So you haven't missed it yet if it's something you're interested in today. And they meet in the building right next door, right next to our little student cafe area in room 500. It's called Starting Point. It's a great place to ask questions. So I encourage you to go check it out if you do have questions about where you're at. One other thing before we get started, I want to give a shout out, and maybe you can help me, to our folks at Weber County Jail who tune in and watch us every single week. Come on. It's fun to do church with you all, so thank you for watching. All right, so we're going to jump right in here. We're continuing our series called Faith Works. James has written a letter to the Jewish community in his time, writing all about what it means to do life as a Christ follower, right? People who have grown up strictly adhering to the law, who found their self-worth obeying the law, obeying every rule as closely as they possibly could was the goal for them. That's how they measured their value and how much God loved them, was how well they could follow the rules. And James kind of says, well, there's that, but there's a whole lot more to it than just following the rules. And he kind of breaks down a sort of list of how-tos to be a Christ follower. And up until this point, it's been a lot of, talking about our works and controlling our tongue and just sort of how-tos. And Pastor Roy has taken some time off this week, and when I saw the passage that he wanted me to teach on, I said, awesome. Because James takes the gloves off, and he gets a little bare-knuckle boxing with us, and it might sting a little bit today. So excited. Let's just kick this thing off and make everybody feel warm and fuzzy. James chapter 4, verses 1 through 10, he says this: "What is causing quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it, and even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want what will give you pleasure. You adulterers! Don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? I say it again, if you want to be a friend of the world, you make yourself an enemy of God. What do you think the scriptures mean when they say that the Spirit God has placed within us is filled with envy? But he gives us even more grace to stand against such evil desires. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but favors the humble. So humble yourselves before God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come close to God, and he will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. Let there be tears for what you have done. Let there be sorrow and deep grief. Let there be sadness instead of laughter, gloom instead of joy. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor." Awesome. I should just pray right now and call it a day. And my wife hates sweet potatoes. And I use the word hate intentionally because it's like a deep-rooted angst against. She despises them, with everything within her. So every Thanksgiving, one of my absolute favorite meals is sweet potato pie. Come on. Right, with the marshmallows on top, you throw it in the oven, they get a little caramelized on top. I mean, that's just an image of perfection. I love sweet potatoes. I love them. My wife and I have been married for 13 years, and thank you. We dated for 3 years before that. So for 16 years, what do you think I've done every single Thanksgiving? Babe, you gotta try it. Babe, you gotta, they're so good. Can you just taste it just once? Now, the first 3 years that we dated, she actually did try them. And every year, she would say, nope, still a no, can't do it, not a fan. I'm like, are you tasting the same thing I'm tasting? Because this is like heaven in a dish right here. Like I said, we dated for 3 years, and every year she'd try them. And I've come to the conclusion now it's because I'm kind of a catch, and she didn't want to lose me. So stupid. Sorry. I think she did it honestly, to maintain a good impression. Because we've been married now for 13 years. Can you guess how many years of those 13 that she's tasted sweet potatoes? 0. She's like, all right, I got them locked in. I'm out of the sweet potatoes. I don't know why I shared that. It literally has nothing to do with my message. But I think sweet potatoes are kind of like James's message today. Even if you don't enjoy it, I sure did. Even if you don't get a whole lot out of it, I know I did. And it's going to be real good. So James kind of takes the gloves off. And I read over this, and I'm like, okay, awesome. How am I going to teach on this? And I read it over again and again and again. And I came to the conclusion of asking a question. Why is James just sort of open palm, just slapping us across the face with some of these harsh words? Why? Why now? Why is he writing this stuff? What do we need to get out of this that he's trying to tell us? And I think he puts a pin in it. If you look at verses 2 and 3, he says, you want what you don't have. So you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And even when you do ask, He doesn't give it to you. You don't get what you want because your motives are all wrong. You want what will only give you pleasure. I think he's saying these things for 2 reasons. He comes out of the gate just kind of bare-knuckled, boxing us up and down, and it stings a little bit. And I think the reason it stings so much is because it hits home, right? This is a common problem of mine. God, if I could just have, God, if you'll just give me this, God, why don't I have this? Why does he have that? Who does he, we come up with every excuse in the book why someone shouldn't have something and that why we should have it because they're not good enough or they did this or they said that and they don't deserve it, but I do. And then when we don't get it, we complain to God, God, why didn't you give me this? And he's like, where's your heart? I think he also says it because it's probably the most critical thing for us to hear. Because in all of this, and he even mentions it a couple times that about God opposing the proud, James is talking about our pride, and our pride is a heart issue, and God is at war for our hearts. Pride attacks our assumed ability to be happy, right? We think of all the things that are out there that this world provides, and we assume it will make us happy. And so we just start filling our lives with stuff, and with better jobs, and more stuff, and with addictions, and with sex, and with everything that you could possibly think of, because we think in our minds, well, if I can just have that, then I'll be happy. We like to live in the grass is greener mentality. My wife and I just bought a house, and we're pretty stoked about being first-time homeowners. It's been a long time coming. We've really busted our tails to get there. And for a long time, I legitimately thought if we could just own a house, then things will kind of calm down and settle down, and we'll be happy. We can kind of, are you kidding me? I'll go back to renting in a heartbeat. Day 2 in our house, we had a sewage block and flooded basement, and it's been awesome so far. Home ownership, guys. But it's that if I could just get there, if I can just have that thing, then I'll be happy. And God's like, no, you can try, but no. I think what James is talking about is teaching us how to be content. Being content is not easy. I looked up the definition for content. It says, to be satisfied with what one is, that's a huge problem that we suffer with, or has, another huge problem. It's not wanting more or anything else. When was the last time you sat back and said, I'm good? It's not often, if at all. We want more. Fill my life, fill this void that I keep experiencing in my heart with more stuff, because I think that's what I need. It's not our fault, though. I mean, it is our fault, but it's not our fault. I mean, if you consider the modern Western world that we've grown up in, right? Everything in our culture today screams, go to school, go to college, get the degree, get the job, get the title, get the bankroll, get the house, get the kids and the wife and the family or the husband, and have the kids, and then buy the house, and then get the boat, and then get the toys, and then get, and the picture of all that is the American dream, right? That's the epitome of happiness today in our culture. And we're often deceived by that, thinking all that stuff will make us happy. Can it make you happy? Absolutely. It's fun. The house that we bought had a pretty good-sized yard, and so I convinced my wife that I needed a riding lawnmower. It's so much fun. I love it. And there was like a good week that we had it, and it's a Craftsman riding lawnmower, and it's just candy apple red. And I parked it in our little barn shed thing that we have in our yard, and I just left the door open, and I stood back and I said, "Woo! I made it." That's the mentality that we're so quick to default to, though, right? We're living in a world that is self-imploding over the pursuit of happiness, what we think is happy, right? We want the good job. Good job equals more money equals more stuff, and more stuff equals more happy. And we just keep digging and digging and digging and digging and digging. And there are moments in all of that where we can be happy and we can feel joy because of our stuff, but it is very temporary. Let me preface all of that by saying Is it wrong to be wealthy? Is it wrong to be successful financially? Absolutely not. Chances are, if that's a position that you're in and you're living comfortably, that you've worked your tail off to get there. And good for you. Kudos to you. You should applaud yourself for how hard you've worked. I will say this, though. There's a huge caveat to that. That if that is your only focus and priority, and thinking that is the only thing that's going to make you happy, you're sorely mistaken. And if that takes more priority than your focus, time, and relationship with a God who is waging war for your heart, you are missing out on more than you could possibly imagine. We have this void in our heart. We spend enormous amounts of time, money, and resources trying to fill that. I found this video of this guy on an airplane. Some of you have probably seen it. And he's trying to put his suitcase in the overhead bin. I'll just use...
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has now turned on the fasten seatbelts as well will be landing in a few minutes. In preparation for our arrival, we are kindly asked you to adjourn to your seats and fasten your seatbelt. Please place your tray table into the fully upright position, open your window blind, and store your luggage under the seat in front of you, or in the other hand.
You're doing it wrong. And I think that's what James, in these somewhat harsh words, trying desperately to get our attention, is screaming out to us, you're doing it wrong. If you think all this stuff is going to make you happy, you're wrong. And yet we try to just force feed ourselves with stuff thinking, well, hey, the world out there says that this is what's going to make me happy, so I'm just going to keep cramming more in there. I'm trying harder and harder, and it's not working, and I'm still miserable, and I'm still lonely, I'm still unhappy, I'm still filled with depression and anxiety and self-doubt, and I think I'm ugly, or I think I'm not good enough, or I think I'm this. Why isn't it working? And God is standing patiently, like the flight attendant was. You're doing it wrong. Shift your focus a little bit, and I can show you something that will just blow your mind. I think of all the sin, and make no mistake that sin is sin. Sin is anything that goes against God. We try to place varying degrees of which sin is worse and all that kind of stuff. And I believe that sin is sin. You go against God, you go against God. You break his law, it's broken. But I will say this, I think God's heart burns against pride the most. Doesn't mean you've broken more law. I just think God's heart burns against pride the most, because pride is sort of the foundation of all the sin that we've experienced. Pride, it was because of pride that Adam and Eve fell into sin. They were deceived into thinking that they could be like God. Awesome, more for me. Let's go. It was because of pride that empire after empire has fallen because they wanted to get their way. It was pride that the Jewish religious leaders, the ones who should have known, crucified Jesus. And it's a dangerous place that God is saying, don't fall into that trap. If you look at the character, the nature, and the personality of God, everything that he is focused outward. And he's saying, I want you to live that way. I want you to live focused outward, but we tend to live focused inward, only focusing on me, only focusing on who's offended me, or who can love me the most, or who can make me happy, or what can make me happy. And God's saying, no, you need to shift your perspective. Let's keep reading. Look at verse 4. He says, you adulterers. Oh. That one hits the gut pretty hard. I would never, ever cheat on my wife. And yet I'm being called an adulterer. You adulterer, don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? I say it again, if you want to be a friend of the world, you make yourself an enemy of God. What do you think the scriptures mean when they say that the Spirit God has placed within us is filled with envy? But he gives even more grace to stand against such evil desires. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but favors the humble. I want to read Eugene Peterson. He wrote the Message Bible. He basically took the Bible and translated it to sort of a modern, almost story-like version of the Bible. And I love the way he translates those two verses right here. Look at this. It says, you're cheating on God. Just bam. If all you want is your own way, flirting with the world every chance you get, you end up enemies of God and his way. And do you suppose God doesn't care? The proverb has it that he is a fiercely jealous lover. And what he gives in love is far better than anything else you'll find. It's common knowledge that God goes against the willful proud, and God gives grace to the willing humble. When I was studying and preparing this, I kind of came to the conclusion that contentment, that's the hard issue that we need to focus on. How do we become content? And I'm sitting there writing and just thinking, and I'm like, contentment isn't very fun to talk about. It's kind of a boring topic. Contentment and being content isn't sexy at all in our world. Having more is. You go outside these doors, and the more you can brag about how much you have, now you're a winner. But being content with where you're at, that's kind of meh. But that's exactly where James is calling us to steer our heart into being content with who we are, to be content with what we have. So what do we do? Where do we go? How do we find contentment? If you look at the very next verse, verse 7, James says, so humble yourselves before God. What does it mean to humble ourselves? And there's four things I want to talk about that I think where we need to start steering and guiding and directing our hearts in this direction of humbling ourselves. Because I think we often mistake humbling ourselves as far as, groveling on our knees and getting down low and saying I'm worthless and I'm a piece of garbage and I don't deserve any of that. It may be true. But God's talking about a position of our heart where we need to be. I think it first means saying, I can't. And I don't care how successfully financially you've been, or maybe you're in the lowest valley and you're poorer than dirt and you can barely afford to get here today. Because believe you me, in this room we've got all of the above. It's willing to say, God, I can't. But you can. Are you willing to admit that in your life? That I don't know everything. I don't know how to do all this. I don't know how to look highly enough upon myself. I don't know how to view my life through God's eyes and seeing myself as one of his beloved, precious children. It means admitting a need. And for some of us, admitting a need is hard. Because that means a little bit of admitting weakness. We don't want to be weak. We don't want to appear to be weak. We want to appear to have it all together. I mean, social media is the epitome of not appearing weak. For example, take out my phone, right? And I snap a selfie with all of us here. Now, instantly, these two sides of the room are going, well, wait a minute. Why wasn't I in the picture? Our pride loves to beat us up and down. And when we can reach a point where we admit a need, be vulnerable and open to God, saying, God, I need you. Maybe I don't know where I'm going. Maybe I don't know all that I need to know. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. When you can open yourself up and be vulnerable and open with God, man, He can come in and do some work in your life. This is a tough one. Accepting yourself as God made you. We live in an age where negative self-image is almost celebrated now. I spent a few years working with our teenagers, and it runs rampant in our schools. And it's almost cool to have a negative self-image and be lowly and make everybody kind of throw a pity party for you. Are you willing to accept yourself as God made you, saying, God made me awesome. I'm going to celebrate who I am. That's not easy to do, and that takes a bit of taking our pride and setting aside. Saying, God, I may not like everything about all this, but I'm going to embrace who you've made me to be. And lastly, it takes a matter of living out humility. Living out humility is setting yourself aside and giving of yourself. Jesus said, the top 2 commandments, the 2 ways to do life, how to follow God, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. Everything that you have in Him, focus on Him and love. Outward. And the second is this: love your neighbor as much as yourself. Outward. The character, the personality, the nature of God is outward focus. The act of Jesus willing to sacrifice His life for you to wipe your slate clean had nothing to do with Him. It was outward. And He's saying, now I want you to go and do the same. Don't make this about you. Show of hands, where are my foodies? Right? My food lovers, you will eat anything and everything. You go to the restaurant and you got to try, you want to go back 10 times because you got to try everything on the menu just to know if it's good or not. And when you find something that's good, you can't, I'm a foodie. And you can't not share it, right? Dude, you got to try this. This will blow your mind. I do this with my wife all the time, just like talking about with the sweet potato pie. Babe, you got to try this. She's like, I'm good. No, you don't understand. This is like, your mind will literally explode. It's that good. Where are my picky eaters at? Come on. It's all right. It's okay. My wife is a picky eater, and I love her all the same. I still continue to try everything that's out there. But you've got your menu, you stick to it, and that's all. That you're not going to change it. There is something awesome that happens though when I get somebody to try something that I love that much. I think I have more excitement and I get more thrill out of watching the expression on their face, right? Let's just take a delicious piece of steak. Ooh, come on. And if you're a vegetarian, let's not get hostile in here. Oh, babe, you gotta. This steak is off. You gotta try it. And she tries it, and that look of that like shocked senses, awakened and alert to the world, like, now, while she's experiencing that kind of bliss, the joy that's happening on my end, I'm like, I know, right? Or like when you give like a birthday present or a Christmas gift. Why do we sit there and record our kids and the people, our family members opening gifts? Because we want to watch the joy that they get to experience opening the gift. Now, what I like is to watch the parents who are recording, because they've got the biggest, dumbest, goofiest grin, and they're open it, and then they see the joy and the expression on their kid's face or whoever's opening the gift, and they're freaking out about the present, but the parent watching is like the joy, and there's that brief split second of pure, and I would call it heavenly bliss, because for a minute, just for a minute, you're experiencing joy of giving of yourself, an outward direction that God has called us to live, and we get to experience it in a brief moment. I love watching our God's Garage videos. If you've seen any of our God's Garage videos where we give away cars, watching the person receive the car is amazing. But watching our God's Garage team, the couple of gals that help out with that, I get to kind of stand off and watch them film it and all this kind of stuff, and I get to watch their expressions and the joy on their face of watching somebody receive a gift completely unexpected. There's nothing like it. And they come back in not even knowing how to express their emotions, because they've just been touched by joy from heaven, because it was an outward focused gift and they got to experiencing something so perfect. This is the way that God is calling us to live. The quickest way to find contentment is to serve the people around you. We just got done with Serve Ogden a couple weeks ago, and if you were part of Serve Ogden a couple weeks ago, just let me see a quick hand. Hundreds of members of our church got together. We went over here to a little community right here in South Ogden, and we just got to fix up homes. No strings attached, no cost. The church covered everything, and we got to bless the neighborhood around us. And it was more fun watching all of us, all the volunteers, when the neighbors come out and they see their yards, and they're just blown away that many people would come out and serve them. But then watching all of us experience that joy of watching the gift that they've given. It's a joy from heaven that we can never begin to explain why it makes us so happy. So what do? Look at verse 10. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor. What does that mean? Like, I kind of got this like Lion King picture in my head, like, no, he's not physically going to lift you up. I think he's going to lift your heart. He's going to elevate your heart to a place of peace, to a place of contentment, where you don't have the need to fill it with more stuff, because you have humbled yourself, you have given of yourself, you have lived in outward focused direction, loving the people around you, and God says, I can use that. How do I know? Because he's already done it. I want to read a passage of Philippians, and then we'll wrap up. In Philippians chapter 2, Paul's writing a letter to the church in Philippi, to the Philippian people, and he says this: Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ? Any comfort from his love? Any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and one purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in a human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Therefore, because of all that, God elevated him to the place of highest honor and gave him the name above all other names, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. It's already been done. That's why I know God will do it again. You humble yourselves before God, you give outwardly, you live your life in an outward focused direction, and God will lift up your heart to a place that you could not even begin to imagine. You will feel in your heart complete because you're living out the will of God. You want to know what God's plan is for your life? Start serving the people around you. That place of peace, that contentment is found not in what we have, but in how we give. Would you bow your heads with me? God, we praise you for being a God who just wants to show us that there's so much more than just stuff. God, help us to humble ourselves, to put the needs, the wants of the people around us before our own. And because of that, God, what you've already done, I know that you will stick to your word, that you will lift our hearts up to a place of contentment, of pure joy that can only be found in loving people the way that you have loved us. I thank you for every heart in this room, God. May we not walk out of these doors and completely forget this, Lord, but may we put this into practice. May we start living this out today. We love you, we praise you, we worship you. It's in Jesus' name we pray.